Doctors in Zimbabwe say 68 people have been treated for gunshot wounds after protests this week. 17 of the victims have had emergency surgery. Now, there have been days of violence between demonstrators and security forces, many angry over a steep rise in fuel prices. Police have arrested hundreds of people, including prominent rights activists. President Emmanuel Mnangagwa has been speaking on social media. Here's part of what he said on Twitter on Thursday. I have been deeply saddened by the events in our beloved homeland. Violence will not reform our economy. Violence will not rebuild our nation. He goes on to say that resolving Zimbabwe's economic challenges is a monumental task, and while it may not always feel that way, we are moving in the right direction. Matyszak is a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies in Pretoria in South Africa. Joins me live from Harare in Zimbabwe. Good to have you with us. What are you hearing about this crackdown and the way it's being implemented by official forces?
It's a very heavy-handed approach. It's very reminiscent of the Mugabe era. The military have been deployed once again. Live ammunition is being used, and people are being arbitrarily dragged from their homes and being beaten up if they are suspected of having taken part in the demonstrations that took place between Monday and Wednesday. There have also been arbitrary arrests of people who are civil society leaders and activists. And the internet was completely closed down from Tuesday afternoon till Wednesday evening. And social media platforms remain closed by the government of Zimbabwe. So it's a very heavy-handed response.
And that's obviously in the immediate now, but sort of these protests and the ongoing anger in the public domain hasn't really happened overnight. Sort of the new Mnangagwa government hasn't been able to attract foreign investment since it took control in elections, and it hasn't been able to control inflation, which has jumped, from 5% in September to nearly 35% in December. What seems to be going wrong with the way the government are acting?
The problem, or the grounds for the problem, was laid quite a few years ago under the Mugabe government, when the Mugabe administration began basically creating money out of nothing. It's rather complicated because Zimbabwe is a dollarized economy, but basically the government began paying off its debts by infusing electronic money into the banking system, which wasn't really backed by any US dollars at all. So the value of that electronic money, these electronic book entries, Zimbabwe basically operates a cashless society and depends on electronic transfers. The value of this electronic money has declined steeply. It's now about a third of a real US dollar. And of course, people are paid in this electronic form. So the purchasing power of their salaries has declined enormously. And of course, when the fuel price was hiked by about 250%, this represented yet a further decline in the purchasing power of workers' salaries, and that's what sparked the violence. And that's basically, it's this fundamental economic problem which is causing the social protests and the disturbances on the streets.
And of course, the
government
has tried to sort of offset that violence by, you might say, offering wage hikes to civil servants, massively increasing their salaries, while, as you say, increasing fuel prices on the other, which is sort of, I wouldn't say try to balance the books, but certainly hasn't helped the situation. You can't sort of take from one hand and give from one hand and take to the other, because it just infuriates the public when they don't actually see any net gain in their pocket.
Well, the increases in salaries hasn't been huge. It's been marginal because the policy of the incoming Mnangagwa finance minister is to engage in fiscal consolidation and to try and rein in government's budget deficit, which is behind the creation of this electronic money in the first place. So the moment government increases civil servant salaries, etc., this increases the budget deficit, increases government debt. causes the creation of more of this electronic money, and the salaries will simply decline and go back to where they were in the first place.
Mr. Matyszak, very briefly, President Mnangagwa will shortly be going to Davos to, the big leaders meeting on business and finance globally. He wants to try and attract that foreign investment into his country, and with what we're seeing over the past few weeks, he's going to have quite a tough sell, is he not, for those who might even consider thinking about investing in his country?
Certainly, that the current situation does not make Zimbabwe look like an attractive investment destination, both from an economic point of view, because it's very difficult for investors to repatriate their profits, and also in the sense of political stability, where obviously the events of the last few days have shown that the country is highly volatile at the moment.
For the moment, Matyszak, thanks so much for joining us from Harare, sir. Good to have you with us.
Most welcome.